Hello and welcome everyone to the Integration Manager Overview webinar. My name is Brandon Cook and I'll be doing a brief intro for Paige today. I have a few quick housekeeping notes before we get started. First off, as you can see, we are using GoToWebinar today. If you look on the right side of your screen, you can see the questions tab. If you have any questions as we're going through today's webinar, feel free to drop those into that panel on the right side of your screen, and we will get to those at the end of today's webinar. Also, this webinar is going to be recorded and will be posted to Njevity.com on the resources page. On that same resources page, you can find all of our upcoming webinars in the sign-up section. We have lots of great stuff coming up over these next 2 months, so feel free to check that out as well. I'll go ahead and read our Njevity mission statement here real fast. Our mission statement is at the core of what we do here at Njevity, and we try to put it into everything that we do. So our mission is to improve the life and success of our partners and customers by providing exceptional business application experiences that simplify, inform, and delight. And with that, I'll hand it over to our presenter today, Paige.
All right, good afternoon, morning, everybody, depending on where you are. My name is Paige Horne. I am a senior applications consultant here at Njevity. Before I came to Njevity, I worked for another partner, Advanced Integrators, for close to 5 years. And before that, I was a controller of a restaurant holdings company that owned restaurants nationwide. So my education and background is in accounting, and then now I am also a consultant as well. So that's kind of my background. We're going to be talking today about Integration Manager. We'll have some polls throughout just to see if you guys are engaged, and then also just to be able to offer CPE for those that need it. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in. If you guys have any questions, we will have a Q&A at the end, but feel free to just chat the questions in the question box, and I believe Brandon will be watching out for those as well, and will kind of ping me if there are questions there, but we will do some Q&A here at the end. So with that, I will go ahead and get started. All right. So what is Integration Manager? It is a tool that allows you to import data into Dynamics GP. Most of the windows are going to follow the same flow as entering data into Dynamics GP manually. And by that, I mean, if you have something that usually shows up as a default, it's going to give you that default. If you have something that usually rolls down from a class, usually it's going to roll down from a class. It allows you to use input, so you can have it ask you for input for, say, a batch ID or a date, any of those types of things that will allow you to do that. Compared to some other integration tools, it does kind of follow the same business logic as entering transactions into GP manually, more so than some of the other integration tools. So that's one thing that's nice. So you can have it use a default distribution for one of your distributions and not for another, and so on and so forth. So you can also customize it with scripting. So a lot of times people think the Integration Manager is a lot simpler than other integration tools, but you can also get pretty complex. You can put some scripts into your integration. You can have translation tables. There's lots that can be utilized with inside of Integration Manager. So up next, we're going to just kind of talk about ways to use Integration Manager. So you can add new or update existing master records. So you can import new employees that have been entered through an onboarding system. You could also update all your vendors to have new payment terms if you wanted to. You can update, vendor addresses. You can import bulk items. So if you have all new items that you're going to sell and you've got those in a spreadsheet, you can import those. You can also import data from other databases. If you have, some internal databases, you can do that as well. You can import transactions. So if you have a point of sale system that you are utilizing inside of a store and you want to import a GL transaction for that or a sales transaction for that, you can do that as well. You could also do a very simple import into a GL transaction entry window. So lots of ways to use it. You can update master records, you can add new master records, and you can import transactions as well. And with that, I'm going to do our first poll question here. So we'll do that. And I'll let everybody do the poll really quickly, and then we'll move along. All right, so the answer there is yes. And one of the nice things is that Integration Manager has that same GP business logic, so it's not going to, for instance, let you insert a record that is longer than what the max field length is, or it's not going to let you update your vendor ID with lowercase letters. So it's going to give you those warnings for those records that you're updating or you're inserting as well. All right, so parts of an integration, there is a source, and you can have more than one source, and usually you're going to have a header and a detail, and then you define the relationships between those two sources. And then you have a destination, and that's where you want that source to go inside of GP. So your source file might be a text file, and then you want that text file to go into the destination of the AP transaction entry window. And then your destination mapping is where you say, okay, I want to take the account number field in my text file, and I want to make sure that that goes into my account number string field inside of GP, or I want this field that might be called, description from client or something like that. That should actually be the reference inside of GP. So that is your destination mapping, and those are the 4 parts of your integration. What can you use as a source? So with Integration Manager, you can use a flat file. So that would be like a text or a CSV file. You can use XML, and then you can also use ODBC connections. And I think that is where a lot of times people aren't aware of that. And so that allows you to connect to other databases. So whether that's like an internal database that you guys are storing information in, or if you even want to go ping out, we've done before when we've done some kind of conversions and stuff, we've pinged out to other GP databases. So you do have that option with that ODBC connection to connect to other databases. And with that, I'm going to do our next poll, which is going out right now. All right, I'm going to close that poll, and everybody said yes, and you're using a flat file, so you're using text or CSV, which you can open in Excel, but you aren't actually using that Excel file source. So you would not use an Excel file, you would use a flat file. All right, so next, where can you integrate data to? And I just pulled this little chart off of the manual for Integration Manager from Microsoft because I thought it had some good information in it. So within Integration Manager, you have the GP destination adapter, and then you have the eConnect destination adapter. And so they have different pieces that you can integrate into. The biggest adds on your eConnect destination adapter is that you have some fixed assets, and I don't know if they actually have that on this list here, but you've got POs, you've got sales orders, you've got quite a few additional options with this eConnect destination adapter. And then your plain GP destination adapter says that you can go into financial, payables management, receivables management, sales order processing, payroll, inventory, and setup. So there's tons of stuff that you can actually integrate into. And I'm going to pause really quickly on my presentation. And I am going to show you inside of Integration Manager really quickly. So this is what Integration Manager looks like when you launch it here. You have new integration, open integration, and we're going to actually build one here at the end. And then there is objects. So in our objects, you can actually go in, and before you even go start to create an integration, you can come down here and see our destination adapters. And just like I just talked about just a second ago, I have GP and GP eConnect. So within here, I can see within each of the different modules, financial, payables management, receivables management, and so on, I can see the different objects that I'm able to integrate into. So whether that's an account or a bank transaction, a general journal, so those are going to be your actual windows that you're importing into. All right. So that is up here under Objects and Integration Manager. And so those are the different places that you can integrate into. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and see here. Oops, start it over. Sorry about that, guys. All right, destination mapping. And so destination mapping is mapping fields from your source to the fields inside of Dynamics GP. So you most of the time are going to be saying, okay, here's your source field, and you're going to map that to a field inside of GP. But you can also use constants. So if you always want an account number to be a certain thing, you can put that constant in there, or you always want the description on the journal entry to be the same thing for this specific integration, you can use constants. You can use scripting, as we discussed a little bit ago, to have some more complexities to your integrations. You can have dates, so system dates, current dates. You can have defaults, so the default within GP. So just like if you were keying in a AP transaction, if you want whatever is the default inside of that window to show up, then you can use that. You can have it be blank, and then you can also have user input. So we're going to walk through those here in just a few minutes. Installing Integration Manager, you have Integration Manager in your GP media. So in the additional products folder of your GP install media, and I kind of put like a little snippet of where mine was. In the additional products folder, you have an Integration Manager folder, and that has the install media there, and it does have separate registration keys. All right, so building an integration, we're going to walk through really quickly how to build one and kind of walk through all the fields inside of our product here. All right, so once you've got Integration Manager installed and registered, you can come in here and you can create a new integration, or you can open one that already exists. And so here, you'll see that you have lots of samples. So as you go ahead and install Integration Manager, it does come with a sample database here that lists all of these integrations, just so that you can see how those things work. So we're going to go in and open up this GL transaction 1 source file, and I'm going to open that up. And you'll see that you have sources, and just like we talked about before, usually in Integration Manager, you're going to have a header and a detail. And so in GP, if you will think about inside of a GP window, you have usually a header and a detail. And so this is kind of the header piece up here, and then the detail or the line level is down here. So that can be accomplished with one or many source files. So if you have one file that lists all of your invoices, and then one file that lists all of your distributions for those invoices, then that would be kind of a 2 source file situation. Or you can use one file that lists all your invoices and all of your distributions. And I won't get too into all the nitty gritty of it here, but just know that usually there is a header and a detail. So we've got a header and a line, and those are both coming from the same source file. And then you have query relationships here. So that was that second bullet point on the pieces of an integration. And what that does is it takes fields from one of your source files and it maps it to the other. So this is just saying that the date and the date are what tie those two sources together. And then you pick your destination, and that's where in GP you want this to go. And in here, you pick your GP window, and then you do the bulk of the work, which is your destination mapping. And so if I double click inside of my destination mapping, you'll see that it kind of follows how the GP window flows. So here's my GP window for general journal. And so it has everything that's really up here on my header, and then I have my entries tab down here, which is going to give me everything that is down here. Okay, so we will kind of look at this and kind of step through this here. So for journal entry, that's your journal entry number, and it does have use default as the default. So that just is going to go pull your next journal entry number. You don't have to do anything there. Intercompany use default, so we don't have any intercompany here. It's just gonna be no. And then you have a batch ID. And so here we've used the constant. So if I drop this box down, you've got several different options. And here it's a constant of GL transaction 1. So it's just basically putting in just a source of whatever you want to type here. So I could type this as this is my batch, and that's what I would use. Another common use in the batch ID is this use input. So earlier I had listed that as one of the things you can use, and that means when I go to run this integration, it's going to pop up a box and say enter my batch ID, and so I can have the user required to put in what they want their batch ID to be here. Okay, everything else down here, transaction type, transaction date, that's all default. So the default for the transaction date is going to be whatever my date is inside of GP. So that's what it's going to be used there. If I drop that box down, I do have the option to say use my system date if I want to. So I could have that be the date as well. Right? So my reference here, again, I've got a constant, but I could also use my input if I wanted to. I could have a source field and so on. Okay, I'm going to pause right here and I'm going to do one more poll. All right, so it looks like a lot of people have used Integration Manager. Actually, about half of you guys have. All right. So here under options, this is a tab that a lot of people don't ever click on, I feel like, but here you've got it. Okay, I've got a missing batch. What do I want to happen? If I am missing that batch number, do I want to cancel it or do I want to add that batch? So there's some, when you're building integrations under options, there's some pieces here that can be helpful if you're getting error messages. All right, I'm going to go down to the entries tab down here just so that you can see a couple of other rules down here. So for our amounts, one thing that's nice inside of Integration Manager is that they do have this use positive source field, use negative source field. So if I have a file that just has an amount and my positive amounts are going to be my debits and my negative amounts are going to be my credits, this is nice. So I'm able to say, okay, I want to use the amount, but the credit should only be a negative, all the negative numbers, and the debits should be all the positive numbers. So that's really nice there. You also have the option whenever you use a source field, over here on the left-hand side, you have a whole bunch of additional options. So you can use a translation table. You can have a case conversion. So if I wanted it to go all uppercase or all lowercase, I can do that. So that's really nice for when you're trying to import master records and you want your vendor customer IDs, those all have to be capitalized. So you can leave it in whatever form it is, and then it will convert it for you. Also nice if, for instance, you want all of your vendor addresses to all be in all caps, similar thing there, you can come in here and convert to uppercase or lowercase. It also gives you the option to remove leading spaces and remove trailing spaces. You can remove or leave either one of those. So again, the trailing spaces is nice if you're pinging out to another database. So if you're pinging out to another SQL database, for instance, there will be a lot of blanks at the end of any of the records, because when you're going and querying those records in SQL, they might have a whole bunch of trailing spaces on them. So that would be a good place where you would want to remove those trailing spaces. And then string truncation means, do you want it to, like, say I'm importing a whole bunch of vendors and I have a vendor name that is way too long. Do I want to cancel that document? Do I not want to import it because I might want to rethink what I want that vendor name to show up as inside of GP? Or do I want it to just cut it off at the max length? So sometimes for things like distributions on journal entries or just distribution reference, stuff like that, you might want to truncate at max length. But for things like vendor names, customer names, you might want to cancel that so that you can rethink that yourself. Okay. All right, and then if null, do I want to cancel the document, or do I want to use blank or use default? So again, if this distribution reference is, blank, I probably don't really care about that. I probably just want to go ahead and just say use default or use blank, right? So but if something more important is, that I might want to cancel the document. So it gives you a lot of options over here on this left hand side beyond just what is inside of this. Okay. So I'm going to pull up one more integration here. All right, so I'm going to pull this up, and when I have a source right here, I can actually right click and I can preview what the source is. So if I want to preview it, I can see what everything looks like inside of there. That's nice for if you have in your source maybe some filtering, then you might want to see what the result of that is. You're able to do that here. So in your source, you do have the option to filter and to sort by different criteria. I'm not going to go through all of that there, but you do have that ability. And you also have the ability to run scripts before or after you go get your source here. Let's close that. All right, so I'm going to start from scratch and I'm going to build an integration really quickly with you guys. So I'm going to click on new, and it pops up this box and it says, tell me what you want to call this integration name. So here I'm going to call this my webinar. And then it's always a good thing to put what it is in the description so that, if you win the lottery and you leave, then someone else can tell what you were doing here. So this is my webinar integration for testing. Okay. And right here, you've got maximum number of errors and maximum number of warnings. And so your maximum number of errors mean it's something, like it's not going to import. So it is, hey, this vendor already exists and you didn't say you wanted to update it, or hey, this data is bad and it's not going to import. So there could be all kinds of errors, but that's not going to import. So a lot of times we'll just leave that at 10. Maximum number of warnings, that is, hey, this truncated because your description was too long, or it might be something that it's going to import, but hey, this happened and we want you to know about it. So sometimes we'll change that to be 1,000, because if everything's going to truncate and we know that, maybe that's okay and we don't want it to stop the integration. So errors, not going to import. Warnings, it's just telling you that there's something wrong there. All right, apply that and say okay. So now that's my integration. Now I have to add the first thing, which is a source. So I'm going to come up here and say add source. And here we've got our ODBC connections and our XML, which I won't go through today just because those are a little bit more complex, but I do want to add a text. So if I have a source that I want to use, so these are all my previous sources that I have, I could use one of those, but typically you're going to have a new source for your integration. So I'm going to define a new text. And this might be my GL transaction header. And I'm just going to go pop out and pick one of the samples. And I'm going to use that one. And when you come in here, you can see all your columns. So I've got an account number, an amount, a reference, and a date. I can filter that if I need to. So if I had something that indicated the header records, I could do that. I could sort it by a certain group. I can group by, so I can do any of those things. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to group by the date for the header. And now when I preview that, I only see the dates. All right, now I'm going to add another source. So I can also right click under sources and add a source, another text, and I'm going to define another one called GL transaction detail. And I'm going to pick my same file there. So I'm just picking that file, but this is going to give me all of the information that I want at that detailed line item level. So I'm going to choose what kind of delimiter I have and go look at my columns. And everything looks good. Okay, and so it says, hey, you got to set up your relationships, and that's what I'm going to do now. So go to my query relationships and set what the relationship between that header and that detail is. And again, here in this example, I'm using one file, but you could also have it be two different files that you're using that you want to set relationships up, and you can use as many sources as you want. If I go to properties here, it does give me the option to set my relationship type. So, you know, is it a one-to-one? Is it a one-to-many? Is it a many-to-many? So what is the relationship type there? Okay, then I choose my destination. So I'm going to go up here to add destination, and I'm going to expand Microsoft Dynamics GP, expand financial, because I know that is where my GL transaction entry is. And then my last step is just to do some destination mapping. So I'm going to go up here. And I'm going to just have this be an input. And my reference is going to be a constant. And that's going to be my GL entry, like that. One nice thing also is that you're able to add notes through Integration Manager. So if I wanted this journal entry to use a source field to import into that little note field, I can do that as well. All right, so under my entries tab, I've got an account number. And so let's see here, I'm going to use a source field. And I'm going to drop this down and use my detail. So typically, you're going to use your header source at the header, and then your detail source at the detailed entry level. So down here, I'm going to use my account. And then I'm just going to kind of give you an example of how a translation works. So down here, if I change this to be a translation, let's see here. Oops. So here I could put, okay, so from 2, that means account number is 0001300, something like that. So you can come in and add your translation table if you want to. I'm going to turn this back to no. Oops. Of course, when you're demoing, you often have issues, you know. Let's see. All right, I guess I had to come back out of that. So you can use a translation table just like normal. Sorry about that confusion. And then you can again use your positive source fields and your negative source fields for amounts. And you can also shift the decimal point. So when you have an amount here, if it's, you know, times 1,000 or something like that, so a lot of times when you ping out to other databases, there won't be decimal places, so you can shift those as well. You can also round if you want to. You can round with a warning, or you can truncate. Those are the options there as far as rounding goes. All right. So I'm also just going to show you down here the use script option. So in your script, if you click on this little box down here, then you're going to get this blank box. So if you are good at scripting, you can do that. You can also come out here to your script library, and this is going to give you some options. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so we can see it. So you have all of these scripts here that are available for you that are, you know, Dynamics GP scripts, and then there's general purpose scripts. So I want to go look up a value, I want to execute a stored procedure. These are going to be a little bit more advanced type scripting for somebody who's writing an integration. But then up here, these are pretty simple and pretty easy to explain. So I can come in here and, like, for instance, concatenating 2 or more source fields. That is pretty common. So I'm going to click on this account number field script, and it tells me a little bit more of, you know, how it works, all of that stuff. You can see how it is down here. And then if you want to, you can click add script and then close. And what that does is it just puts in that script in here, and then you can change things to fit more of your own source fields. So here, this account segment 1 wouldn't work for our example because we don't have a source called accounts. So I might come in here and put GL transaction detail dot account or something like that. And then if I come in here, I can always check my syntax, and this says script compiled successfully. One thing to note there is, like, I do not have a source field accounts segment 3, and it still allowed it to compile. So it's just making sure that everything looks good as far as your syntax and the way that you're writing it. It's not really looking at whether or not those fields exist. So it's just something to think about there. If I go into my script library over here, there's also some nice scripts for removing dashes from an account number. There is setting the batch date, and there is setting the posting type for a GL account, integrating multi-column GL history. So there's lots of stuff that you can use if you have files that are in not such great shape, or you're importing from a legacy system, all of that. There's tons of scripts available here, and they really are pretty simple to implement with your own data. You can also, while you are in these windows, you can click on, like, how do I add a before integration script, and it will pop up a little box there. So it does have some nice help features within the tool as well. Okay, so from there, you can save it. And then once you have your integrations created, you can run them from here, or if you have, and I don't think, let's see here, it's going to be grayed out. Most of the time you have this run integration tool with inside of GP. So if you're somebody, you have users, they're just going to be running this integration. They're not going to be creating anything. You can just show them how to use this run integration tool, and it pops up the box that looks just like this, but instead of open, it says run. So once we have everything built, oh, I had to use script. Got to add those. Then you can run it from here. Oh, and I think I've got an error on this training environment, so it's not going to run all the way through. But when you click run, it then creates your entry inside of GP. So what it's doing when it creates the entry inside of GP for those Microsoft Dynamics GP adapters is it's really just almost exactly like a macro. So it's basically, it'll look like it closes down GP and then it will reopen GP once it's done its stuff in the background, and you will have your transactions in batches to review and post. So I'm going to do my last little poll here. Close that poll. Okay, so that is kind of the presentation in and of itself. And now if we have any questions, we can open it up for questions. That's just kind of a simple walkthrough. Take a flat file or a database and import that data into GP. You can update, or you can add, or you can do both. You can enter transactions. So that's all just to kind of show you guys how Integration Manager works. If you're interested in looking at building integrations, or you have questions about what integration tool might work best for you, then you can always reach out to us at just support@njevity.com. But right now, I'll just go ahead and open it up for questions if anybody has any.
No questions right now, but I'll give you a chance to go with the questions.
All right, well, if you guys don't have any other questions, then I will let you guys have a couple more minutes of your lunch hour back. And for those of you that needed CPE, Brandon and I will take a look at that and get that over to you. And with that, I will close this out. Just feel free to reach out if you have any additional questions.